Chances are you've heard of this new Hulu series called Under the Bridge. It's based on the real-life murder of Victoria teenager Reena Virk. Many people are talking about it, not least of which is Kelly Ellard, who's now known as Carrie Sim, who killed Reena Virk, and according to parole documents that we've received, has some thoughts on the series of her own.
This girl, Reena Virk, she's been missing for 3 days.
That name, I saw something.
What happened under the bridge?
I haven't seen the series Under the Bridge. I'm not sure that I will, but it brings back massive memories for me because when I was a reporter at the Vancouver daily newspaper, The Province, back in 1997, I spent a week in Victoria covering this case when it broke, when we learned after this week of rumors which had spread like wildfire that something horrific had happened, and that ended with Saanich police discovering the body of Reena Virk, where she had been killed and tormented by this group of teenagers. Now, I cannot stress for you how giant a story this was and how big a deal this was. The basics of it are that Reena Virk was a 14-year-old girl who was insecure, kind of desperate to make friends, to be part of a group, and this group of teenagers, teenage girls, lured her to this point underneath this bridge where she was beaten. One of them stubbed a cigarette out in her head before she staggered across the Craigflower Bridge, followed then by two people. One of them was Warren Glowatsky and the other was Kelly Ellard. And they followed her to the other end of the bridge, beat her, and Kelly Ellard held Reena Virk's head underwater until she drowned. One of the big elements of this case, and it's presumably what's also made Under the Bridge such a watchable series for people, is that back then in 1997, this was really one of the big first cases we'd heard about teenage swarming, and particularly about violence involving a group of teenaged girls. I attended some of the first court appearances that week for the kids that were charged in relation to this, and on the outside you often see this boastful behavior before what's actually happened sets in, but once they're in front of a judge, that all kind of disappears and you often see them for the children they actually are. Kelly Ellard is serving a life sentence for second-degree murder. She was charged as a young offender, but she was tried in adult court, and so she's been on some form of release in the community for quite some time, which is why we get these occasional parole reports from Canada's Parole Board, which kind of give you an idea of how she is doing with regards to her release. She's 41 years old now. She has a couple of kids. Her partner is out of the picture, but we know from these documents that she's kind of struggling with the high cost of living, with the problems of being a single mother, and also with her lack of remorse over time for the killing of Reena Virk. So what we've learned from this latest parole document is that she has started to take some ownership for her actions. She started to talk more about it to the counselors she sees as part of the parole process. And she's also heard about Under the Bridge, this TV series, and she has some thoughts on it. And I'll read directly from the parole document to give you an idea of what it says. You recently also demonstrated some remorse and victim empathy after a discussion about an upcoming television series based on your crimes. You said the series is disrespectful to the victim and her family, and that the index offense was so horrendous that it would re-victimize the victim's family. And what of the family? I can still remember knocking on Suman Virk's door. That's Reena Virk's mother. That week, she answered the door. She asked me if I had a daughter, basically, if I had a family, if I could imagine what they were going through. And I felt just awful about that. That is my job, but I felt terrible about that. And to be honest, I still kind of do today.
The assault on Reena was referred to as a fight. I mean, this was far from a fight.
You know, I took a look at some of my old stories from that time recently, and I'd completely forgotten that I went back to Victoria a year after this happened in 1998, and I sat down with the Virk family in their home to talk about their daughter's death. And you know, they were very gracious to talk to me, to talk to the province at that time. And you know, they spoke about what it was like for them both to lose a daughter, but also to feel victimized at the time as, you know, the world's media kind of locked in on them, victimizing them twice effectively, asking, you know, what had they done, instead of looking, you know, as it ultimately turned out, to the real perpetrators of this crime. And so 27 years after it happened, the death of Reena Virk is back in the news again. It's interesting to kind of note that now this has moved into the domain of Hollywood and, you know, what they do with narratives, because of course their version of the story will be the one that is the most widely known, you know, far beyond the borders of British Columbia, where it happened. And you know, ultimately though, this was just a story that, as much as it was then, it is now kind of hard to accept. It's hard to believe it happened. It's hard to believe how horrible and evil people can be, even teenagers. And you know, ultimately, it's just really sad.